Good day to you, wherever you may be joining us from around the world. It's my pleasure to participate in this NatCap virtual fair and share with you a little bit about how to pay for college. And I know that that's a topic of great concern to so many families. And I'm glad that I can talk with you a little bit about financial aid in the coming moments. My name is Adam Adams, and I serve as the Director for Global Education at Dordt University. We are a small institution in the state of Iowa, in Sioux Center, Iowa. We have a student population of approximately 1,450 on campus, as well as another 300 students that join us virtually from around the world in our master's degree programs. I've worked at Dordt for the past 7 years, and I find this a fantastic place to live and to raise my daughter and grow my family here, and then to engage with our students from across the world. More than 34 nations are represented on our campus, roughly 10% of our student population. And so with that information, I think that this time together will be important for families from outside the United States that are looking at how to make education in the US affordable. And if you are an American living abroad that's joining with us as well, I will mention a little bit about Fafsa, and you'll see that so much of this information is relevant to you too. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and allow you to follow along in my presentation. So financial aid, and what is it that we're actually going to talk about today? So first, we will be looking a little bit at what are college costs or university costs in the US and Canada. What are some strategies that you can use to pay for your university experience? And then as time allows, at the end of this conversation, I'll be happy to respond to any questions that may come for those that are watching today. So first, what are the expenses that need to be paid to study in the US and Canada? So often we just think about what the tuition fees are going to be, and we don't think beyond that. And there are a lot of different pieces that make up the total cost of enrollment in the US and Canada. These are represented in several different ways, and so we'll take some time to go through those. First, there are the direct costs. And by direct cost, I mean those expenses that you will pay directly to the university. And in general, these are the costs that will be covered by gift aid, by scholarships and grants, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So frequently, your direct costs are the ones that will be reduced through your scholarship opportunities. So first and foremost, tuition. This is by and large the most significant amount of money that you will spend for your university education. Now, when it comes to tuition and you're working on your financial aid package with your university, you want to pay very close attention to how they share that tuition cost with you, because there are different ways that that can be explained. If you start school in August, which is the traditional time to start the academic year in the US and Canada, you will likely see your tuition costs for one entire academic year. If you start in the springtime, let's say you come to the US or Canada in January or February to start your studies, you may only see a 6-month expense or a 6-month tuition. So you want to have clarity with the institutions that you're applying to whether they are sharing their tuition costs with you by academic year or by semester, or even if they are listing that cost by credit hour. And credit hour is another name for your time in the classroom. A traditional undergraduate student in the United States will spend 15 credit hours per semester in the classroom. So there are some institutions that may charge you by credit hour. Now, by and large, most universities will say, if you are a full-time student at our university, you can take as few as 12 hours of class or as many as 18 or 19 hours of class. And all of those courses are one fee. So you want to make sure that you understand what exactly are they communicating by your tuition cost. And then the next thing to consider is that each year in the United States, the cost of living increases, much like in any other part of the world. And one place that your family will see the cost increase at your university is in tuition costs. And this can go up between 2 to 4% or more per year. It really depends on the institution that you're looking at, but do expect that whatever your tuition fee is for your first year at university, it's going to increase from one year to the next on that. Now, as you are looking at institutions, one thing that I would like to note is that state universities or public universities in the US and Canada, they will have different cost structures than a private institution. So at a public university, you will generally find that there's a rate for local residents who are paying taxes and those kinds of things to subsidize the education. Then there's an out-of-state rate. So for students that are coming from within the US or Canada, but are traveling from farther away, they'll have a different fee structure. And then finally, international students tend to have the most expensive fee structure if they're going to a public or state institution. In general, private institutions will have one pay rate, one fee structure for international and domestic students, and it's going to be consistent along. So that's another question to just ask. Beyond tuition, there's room and board. And board is just a strange term that means meals. It actually comes from time in the past when there were things called boarding houses, and individuals would have their own plank of wood they would put on their lap, and that board was what they would eat their meals off of. So we still use room and board when we are essentially talking about housing and food costs. So every institution is going to have housing and food costs for you. These are going to change based on single occupancy in your dorm room, 2 people or more within a dorm room. Then maybe there's on-campus apartment options that are available. And then beyond where you're actually living, your food expenses can change between how many meals are you trying to cook yourself in your dormitory or in your apartment, and then how many meals you're not cooking, but that you're expecting to eat. So some schools may have a 10 meal plan, an 18 meal plan, a 21 meal plan. A 21 meal plan would mean that you get 3 meals a day, 7 days a week from a dining area on the campus. That's obviously the most expensive room and board option that you can find. But in general, institutions have some flexibility because students like to sleep late. Maybe they miss breakfast and they're just going to have a smoothie or a bowl of cereal or something on their way to class, or energy bar. So you can learn from each individual institution how they may want to interact with adjusting your room and board expenses. And then finally, this last picture here you see of a printer and someone that's exercising, and healthcare, which now is really appropriate with the shot. These are fees, just general living expenses. So maybe your school is going to allow you to print 1,000 pieces of paper per semester. Well, they're going to just go ahead and charge you for that up front, and then you can use any printer on campus to print your papers, to print study notes, whatever it may be. Library uses. Frequently there are athletic facilities and recreational facilities nearby, so there'll be some kind of recreational fee. And then health costs with counseling or first care, initial care, urgent care that you can find on your campus. So all of those fees are generally not negotiable. Every student's going to need to pay those. And these 3 things, tuition, room and board, and fees, make up what are the total direct costs, which you're actually paying to the school to go to university there. Next, we have what's called indirect costs. And so you can see from the pictures here, that's going to primarily include your airfare, any kind of travel you're doing within the United States once you're here. Who doesn't want to go to Chicago and see the bean, or travel to California or Florida and experience the tourist sites that are there? So you need to think about what your transportation costs will be, not only getting to the United States, going back home in the future, but then just local travel that takes place while you're here. In addition to that, books are necessary for your education. And this can be another substantial cost, because textbooks in the United States and Canada can be incredibly specialized, where there's very low amount of them that have actually been printed, and then they have very specific information within. So there are different methods to adjust what you're paying for books. Obviously, the most expensive is that brand new book that no one else has ever used before. In general, you can sell your books back, and those will be sold as used books in future semesters. So you can save substantial money by using used books. Another option that's becoming more and more prevalent across the US is renting a book, where this can either be done electronically. If you have an iPad or some other type of tablet, you can rent a digital version of a book, or you can rent a physical book in your hands that you give back to the bookstore at the end of the semester. And then finally, there are books available in your library. I know at Dordt, where I work, most of our textbooks are available in the library, but you can't take them out of the library, and then you're limited in the amount of time that you can use that. So maybe you can check out your beginning math class book for 2 hours a day and use it within the library. So those can cause some challenges. Then obviously, some students choose to save on books by partnering with a friend once they've spent a year or two on campus and they know what their majors are and classes they're taking. There are ways that you can save on these indirect costs through some creative thinking. Healthcare in the US is expensive. And this is frequently a spot where international students and families are surprised by what does US health insurance actually cover. Within the US, every student is going to have some kind of basic healthcare plan that meets the Affordable Care Act requirements. Frequently, institutions will have a provider that they will recommend to a student, and some institutions will actually just add this straight into your bill, where you will have appropriate healthcare while you're in the United States. It's not provided by the university, but they have secured a provider on your behalf, and then they will just bill you for that insurance. Sometimes institutions will say it's your responsibility to get healthcare on your own, and then you provide documentation supporting the fact that you've paid for your healthcare. And then what's really unique for the US and deserves some further explanation is that if you come to the US as a university athlete, frequently international student healthcare is not covered, does not cover any athletic injuries. And so you will buy a supplemental athletic rider for any kind of injury that you would suffer while you're participating in collegiate athletics. And sometimes that can literally double the cost of your student health insurance, because playing sports does increase the risk that you may be injured. And so there will be a need to talk with your university, either the athletic director or your coach, to understand what supplemental insurance do you need to have on hand to participate in athletics. And they won't allow you to take the field until you have that covered. Frequently, if you need medication or you need dental care or vision care, those are not covered by international student health insurance. Part of this is the idea that a student is going to return home once a year and can take care of those kind of yearly checkups while they're home on vacation. If you would need to get that kind of service in the US, there are supplemental fees where you could pay for your dental care or medication or eye care. In the event of a dental emergency or a vision emergency, that usually is covered by your health care, but your annual checkups to make sure your teeth are healthy and your eyes are healthy, that's going to be a supplemental cost. So now that we have this idea of what are our direct costs and our indirect costs, you're going to add all of those together. And when you add all of that together, that's what we call the total cost of attendance. And then from your total cost of attendance, we'll get into kind of the meat of our conversation today, which is financial aid, because what you're going to do is take the total cost of attendance and you're going to subtract your financial aid from that amount. And what remains is what we call out-of-pocket costs. And out-of-pocket costs are essentially the responsibility of the student and the family. And so before you commit to an institution, you really want to understand what is your out-of-pocket cost. And as institutions have different price ranges and give different scholarship amounts, that final cost could be substantially different from what the initial sticker cost is, the initial price. So let's continue as we move into that. So again, the bottom line on all of this is that you're going to take your cost of attendance, and then you're going to subtract your financial aid package. And then what remains, that equals the amount that's paid by the student's family. Now, here in the US, what we have to do is provide a document to you called an I-20. This is what you take to the US Embassy to receive your visa. On that I-20, every US institution is going to list all the financial aid that's been awarded to you by the institution, and it's going to show what your family's responsibility is. And then the embassy may ask to see evidence that you can actually cover that cost. And in general, the embassy wants to see the ability to cover the cost of expenses for one academic year. Now, to be clear on that, we know that education is expensive. There is an ebb and flow within your earnings throughout the year, so you need to show that you have the ability to do that. You don't necessarily need all of that money right at that instant when you're going in for your interview. So there are essentially 4 different kinds of financial aid, and I want to talk about how all those pieces go together. You can see from my slide here, those pieces may not fit together very well, but I believe you understand that it is like putting a puzzle together. You need to think through what you're going to receive. Essentially, there are 4 different kinds of financial aid that you're going to receive. Institutional financial aid, outside scholarships, money from your sponsors that you may have, and then work study. All of this money together will be what's used to pay for your education. So by institutional aid, this is probably the largest amount of aid that you're going to receive. And institutional aid comes in many different types. We'll go through each one of those in the coming slides. But essentially, institutional aid is going to include your academic scholarship. Academic scholarships are quite simply financial aid you receive based on your high school ability and performance. This might include your grade point average from your high school years, your accomplishments on a standardized test score, or some other kind of assessment that the university is asking for to show what kind of student and what your aptitude was as a high school student. You may also get some kind of leadership scholarship because of activities that you've been involved in while you were at university, or I'm sorry, while you're in high school or secondary school. You can receive scholarships for music performance, art, theater, worship arts, all sorts of things. These are different activities that you have been involved in, and the university wants to honor your hard work in that and also encourage you to continue doing those kinds of things on our campus. It's students like yourself that have these skilled gifts and these things you've worked on so hard that make our campuses a wonderful place to attend. So we want to recognize your accomplishment and then encourage you to do that on our campus. So if you're a good musician in high school, we want you to be a good musician at our university. Much like if you're a good artist or actor in high school, we want you to do those things on our campus too, to make this a great place to study. Athletic scholarships, obviously that fits into institutional aid. And then there are a few other very specific types of aid, which are generally called donor-funded scholarships, which means someone who is an advocate for that institution has said, I want to give money for business majors, and those are donor-funded scholarships. And then every school may have some kind of one-time scholarship or grant that you're going to receive at the start of your academic experience for a variety of reasons. Next, there's need-based aid. And so this is another kind of aid that may come from within the institution, a type of grant. And then for US citizens, you can also get the Fafsa, which is a free application for federal student aid. And there are different types of grants and loans for US citizens and permanent residents that are based on need. We'll discuss those in a little bit. Outside scholarships, that lower left-hand corner, these are scholarships that you have to do your own homework. And what I like to tell a student is, if it takes you 4 hours to win a $500 scholarship, you have still earned $125 per hour of your hard work. So it is worth your time and effort to look for outside scholarships and to apply for them. Adding $100 to $1,000 makes a big difference for your family. So please look for those. There could be a country-based scholarship program wherever you're watching this video from. Maybe there's an opportunity for you there to get a scholarship or participate in a specialized program of cooperation between the US and your country. A corporation may have scholarships. I've had friends that have received scholarships because of the factory that their father worked at, or because of a certain product in that country that wants to promote education in the United States. Churches or charitable organizations may have scholarships. Sometimes it's just worth asking to see if your church would be willing to sponsor you, particularly if you're looking at a Christian education in the United States, and you can show how much that's going to provide to your community when you return and work in your area of study with a biblical worldview. On-campus work study is something where you may be able to work a few hours a week, washing dishes or answering a telephone. Basically, every building on a university campus needs some kind of student employee to keep it clean, to answer the phone, to run errands. There's so many different things you can do, even video production or playing music. Those are all work study opportunities on a campus. Schools tend to limit that until they see that you're able to be successful academically. And as you show your abilities to succeed as a student, the opportunities to work may continue to grow. There is a federal regulation in the US, at least, that you cannot work more than 20 hours a week. And we really want you to be successful as a student. So at my institution, you can start work 8 hours a week, and then it grows from there throughout your time on our campus. And then finally, you need to talk with your sponsors and family funds and understand what are they actually prepared to provide, because you need all of these numbers to work together so that even after you've received a lot of financial aid, what's left is something that your family and sponsors may be able to cover consistently. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention as we move on is that financial aid is multifaceted. It's lots of different puzzle pieces. So an important thing to ask is the scholarship I'm getting renewable? And what I mean by that is it something you get to keep all 4 years that you're at university? So some schools will provide both renewable scholarships. Those are the best. And maybe there's an objective, like you have to maintain a certain grade point average to keep that scholarship, or You have to perform a certain number of times with the music department, but they're renewable. That money is yours to get year after year while you're at the institution. Some schools also provide non-renewable scholarships, and these are just good for 1 year. So once you use it, then it's gone. So it's helpful to know that, because that would mean the total cost of enrollment for your family is going to increase in following years after that non-renewable scholarship is gone. Then some institutions will use a term stackable or non-stackable. And that means, can I take this academic scholarship and use it at the same time as my activities scholarship? And every institution will have rules on what are stackable and non-stackable awards. And in general, a large non-stackable award, it may be so large that they're not allowing other funding to go on top of that, but it will be substantially more than what you would have received if you pieced other pieces together or other scholarships together. So talk with your admission counselor or the financial aid advisor about that. And then also be sure you do know what grade point average do you have to keep in order to keep your scholarship, or will that grade point average increase from 1 year to the next? Those are all important questions to understand for your financial aid. And then we want to be focused on your success and looking forward at being successful. But you may want to understand what may happen where I would lose my scholarship. And institutions are not interested in seeing that happen. We want you to be successful and contribute to our campus, but it may be it may be a good idea for you to be aware of what may make you lose your scholarship. So scholarships in general are money that's awarded based on your achievement, either academic achievement or activities achievement. Scholarships do not need to be repaid. Another kind of award you may receive is what's called a grant. US citizens frequently get something called the Pell Grant. That's a federal award. Our institution has an international student grant. It's a need-based grant for international students. It's based on family need, and it does not need to be repaid. So a grant is similar to a gift. It's something based on your need. It doesn't need to be repaid. It's not based on your ability or anything like that. It's simple assistance for your family to make your education affordable. And then finally, loans are aid that you receive and you need to pay them back. And frequently this is reserved for US citizens and permanent residents, although there are some institutions that may provide private loans to international students. That's something you need to ask your admission counselor about. So within these scholarships, merit-based aid is based on your grade, your talent, your athletic ability, whatever it is that you have achieved. And I mentioned a few slides ago, we as universities, institutions of higher education, we want to provide a fantastic learning environment. And one way that we do that is by having a vibrant community on our campus. So we had a student at Dordt a few years ago who was a fantastic calligrapher. And she received some scholarship funding for her calligraphy skills through our art department. And now our campus has beautiful examples of calligraphy on our walls because of murals that she's done and other paintings that are around. So that really added to our campus. Maybe you're a fantastic musician or artist or actor, and you're going to help produce fantastic memories on our campus. So that's how we recognize your merit and your ability, is what are you going to give to our school? And we want to see that. So that's a really important way to think about yourself. Excuse me. That's an important way to think about yourself as you're applying for these scholarships, is to communicate, this is what I can do, I enjoy doing, and that will bring vibrancy to your campus. Then finally, the lower part here, need-based aid. This is where most institutions will ask questions about your family's assets and employment, how many other children are in school, questions like that, to determine what kind of need you may have. For US citizens and permanent residents, this is going to happen through the Fafsa. Your admissions counselor can help you work through that together. And then for international students, frequently you're going to have some kind of document that you're going to use. So again, just moving through that, Athletics is a very important part of aid. If you are an athlete, please recognize that along with being admitted to your institution, you also need to meet the eligibility requirements of the governing body, the athletic body that supports those athletics across the United States and Canada. The two largest ones in the United States and Canada are the NAIA and the NCAA. Those are two different groups, but they have their own academic and athletic eligibility requirements. And frequently, your athletic scholarship will be contingent upon your eligibility in those groups. So you would want to talk with your admission counselor as well as your coach to make sure you're aware of what your responsibilities are to be eligible as an athlete. So when we get back to these ideas of outside scholarships, I just want to help you think creatively. The Google is fantastic at doing searches. As you spend time doing that, you'll be able to find places where scholarships are available and apply, not just to your institution, but any other kind of group that's providing a scholarship. It's not bad to hear no. Frequently, you'll find, though, that there are specialized scholarships out there with very low applicants. And so your rate of actually receiving those awards is good. But don't be afraid to hear no on a scholarship application, because there will be some yeses mixed in, and every little bit helps. You may want to ask your church, again, or a charitable organization in the area, would you be willing to fund my education, especially if you are going to be involved in a field that is going to contribute to the development and well-being of your part of the country or in your neighborhood. There are people that are going to want to see you succeed and do well. Sometimes at a Christian university, if your church commits to giving you $500 or $1,000 a year, the school will honor that commitment and match it. So that's another question to talk with your university about. Do you have church matching scholarships? And it may be limited, but if your church is more excited about giving $500 a year, for example, because the university is going to match that, you definitely want to pursue that, because you just went from $500 a year to $1,000 a year. So there are lots of ways to think through that on how you can get funding from outside of the institution you're applying to itself. Finally, work study. This is something that every student does. I still remember I went through college and I ran a laminating machine for 5 hours a week. So everything that professors needed covered in plastic, it was my job to make sure it was covered in plastic. And that was a hot and tiring job, but it's something that I did that helped me get through school. So please just say yes to whatever those work study opportunities are. As frequently, they're not incredibly taxing, but it's something that needs to be done on campus, and you'll get to make good friends with other students that are doing that job, as well as the faculty and staff at the school that you're working with regularly. And don't be afraid to reduce your work study hours in order to succeed at school. You have to be successful as a student. Much of your scholarship will be based on your academics. So don't give that up to make a few dollars washing dishes in the kitchen. Sponsorship and family funds, something just to consider here is there may be people in your community or within your country that have a foundation to help students study abroad. And so take your time to look into that. Just be aware that if you are using a sponsor, when you go to the embassy, you need to show that they are in fact contributing in some way to your education. But there are people in your community that want to see you succeed. For US students, please use the Fafsa. International students, some schools use the financial aid profile, the CSS profile. Your admissions counselor will talk to you about that. Or an institution may have their own aid that they want, or their own form that they want you to complete. So in conclusion, let's go back through some of these words that you should know and things you should ask. And do not be afraid to ask questions. Schools know that your education is probably one of the largest expenses your family has ever paid, and you're looking for different ways to cover those costs. This is a really important decision that you're making. And if you don't ask, you don't know what is coming your direction. And so please just have frank conversations so that your family can make your education accessible. So to wrap those up, renewable or non-renewable scholarships. Don't expect your scholarships to be there every year unless the school explicitly says that they are renewable. Are your scholarships stackable or non-stackable? This means, can they all be added together? For example, an academic scholarship and an athletic scholarship. Are you allowed to have both of those at the same time at that university? What are your grade point average requirements in order to keep your scholarships? What are the time requirements related to being involved with athletics or some kind of performance in order to keep the scholarship? And do you think you'll have the time and ability to do that? And then finally, what circumstances might lead you to lose that scholarship? Those are all worthwhile things to know and to ask about. And so with that, I'm going to see if there may be any questions that are out there for me. And if not, just thank you so much for your time today.
Adam, to give people a minute or so to chime in, because there are quite a few on the live webinar here, they can certainly use the chat or the Q&A to pose any questions. I did have a question. First of all, I learned a lot. Granted, I'm not an international student, never have been, or probably never will be. Oh, here's one. What is the best way to research scholarship for missionary kids?
That's a fantastic question. So in short, I would say start with whatever the agency is or the local church is that's supporting your family on the mission field. So you would want to start there, either denominational or mission agency scholarships that may be available. At a Christian institution, you would simply ask your admissions counselor, do you have missionary kid scholarship? And most of us are going to say, yeah, absolutely, fill this form out. And there will be aid available for you there. There's also the Christian Missionary Scholarship Foundation. If you type that in to Google, it'll bring up that form, or you could contact me later. That's an agency that provides scholarships for missionary kids. And then I would say for any kind of leadership or life experience essay, really focus on what was your role as a missionary kid? How were you involved in your parents' ministry? What did you learn living cross-culturally? All of these essay-related scholarships that you're going to apply for really focus on how you are unique and how you are distinct. Every student in the world has been impacted by COVID, so it might just be hard to write an essay and say, I was impacted by COVID, and so we're looking for extra help. But if you can say, COVID was something that really impacted our community, and this is how our family was involved in ministry to support others affected by it, those things that make you unique and distinct because of your time as an MK will be recognized. But yeah, start with your local church, with your mission sending agency, the denomination that you may have served in, and then ask your institution specifically what's available for them. That's a great question.
Just to give people another minute to type in any others, curious, who should they be working with at the university level? And at what point in their application process should they be doing that? Like, should they be doing it earlier than maybe they think? Like, I haven't committed yet to your university. In fact, maybe I have a short list. Should I be working with people at all of those? At what point is that appropriate?
So I would encourage a student, when you're talking with your admissions counselor, to not say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I want to know what financial aid you have available. That's a little too fast in the conversation. Please make sure that it's a school that offers the degrees that you're looking for, that you're interested in, and then it's appropriate to start asking about financial aid. And every university is going to do it a little bit differently. So I can just speak from my experience that at Dordt, we would want you to have submitted an application, which does not mean that it's completed or that you're even admitted to Dordt, but that you are in process in your application at Dordt. We want to know who you are in your academic application, and then you are eligible to start applying for our scholarships. And so our first round of financial aid, those decisions will be made early December. So students that have applied prior to then, even if they're not admitted to Dordt, would have opportunity to have their name in the pool for some of those specialized aid amounts. So that's a great question for your admissions counselor. In general, they are going to help you with the application, but you're going to send it to the financial aid office. And usually you don't start speaking with financial aid until you have been admitted to the institution, because once you're admitted, then it's that conversation on how do we get you to be committed and make that decision to attend our institution. We'll have those conversations with you at that time. But please, as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the biggest expenses your family is going to undertake, and you need to have those kinds of conversations with your admissions counselor. But really make sure I know that the school has the degree that I'm interested in, and I actually am interested in the institution before looking for financial aid and those kinds of questions.
Obviously, we're less than 30 days, or depending on when you define early December, it is right around the corner. So can you speak to any of the kids out there in terms of timelines of the expectation of how long it takes to apply to get those conversations going?
Sure. So if most institutions that are involved in this fair today, if you started the application process today, within the next couple of days, you would hear from your admission counselor, either by an email or a text message. So the process to actually start to apply and move to being what's called an admitted student can be really pretty quick. The things that you would want to have in place are, does your college counselor at your high school know that you're applying to schools, and are they ready to send your transcript? Because you can't be admitted unless we know that you are academically ready to attend our institutions. But if you started that process today, your school counselor could have documents to us by the end of the week, either what's called unofficial documents. And I know that elsewhere throughout the virtual fair, you're going to learn about the admission process. But there's something called unofficial documents where we can start to determine your admissibility to our institution. So the sooner you get those to us, the sooner you can be admitted and have access to financial aid options. And then your official documents will come later, before you're actually what's called enrolled, meaning you actually have permission to sit in on your classes and be a university student. So we want to help you through that whole process from starting the application, which I would encourage you right now, especially if you want to go to school in August. Now's the time to apply. Get started on that, and then we'll walk you through that throughout the coming months. And then please pay attention to all these other excellent webinars that are going to be available, because there are so many other parts of this process that my colleagues across the US and Canada are going to respond to for you.
That's some really great advice. I think you've really given us a good understanding of kind of the timeline and the process and the expectation. And so hopefully anybody watching live or on demand here in the coming weeks can come back and review that, maybe share it with their parents or their children if it was the parents participating today. So thank you, Adam, for doing this. Again, your contact information is that on another, so Adam Adams at Dordt.
Yeah, adam.adams@dordt.edu. I didn't add that to the slide, but also stop by our booth in the virtual fair if you're there, or just Google Adam Adams Dordt University and you'll find me. And I'll respond through WhatsApp or email, however you choose to contact me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time and expertise, Adam.
You're welcome.